So now let's take this one step further and look, what is the difference between an apple and a pomegranate? Essentially, let us go one step deeper. The Kohen Gadol represents spiritually the entire nation. The Kohen Gadol effects atonement for the entire nation, and all of his acts must be in all of their spiritual and material benefit. We see here also a wonderful aspect of the unity. Indeed, the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, says that even the one who is leading the prayers, the cantor, must be at peace in his heart with every single member of the congregation, because the one who leads the prayers must not exclude anybody. He must represent everyone. There's a wonderful metaphor about this in general, about how prayers, Judaism, we do have communal prayer. It's not only an individual experience. And this vessel of prayer that we offer to God should not have any faults or cracks in it. And it said that when anybody feels any sense of hate or antagonism towards someone else, so this in a sense is a fault in the vessel, and it will not be fitting to receive God's blessing. And this is why the very famous statement in the end of the Talmud, it says that the Holy One did not find any vessel which is able to contain this incredible blessing, God's infinite blessing, except for peace. Peace is that which is able to contain blessings. So clearly, as we will see, this is also the Kohen Gadol. So the Kohen Gadol represents all kinds of Jews. And there are some members of Israel who are comparable to apples and others who are comparable to pomegranates. We find this comparison in a very beautiful poem, which is a biblical poem. The Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs of King Solomon, which is a very passionate love song that was nonetheless canonized amongst the 24 books of the Torah, because the sages understood it as a parable of the love between God and Israel, God being the groom and Israel being the bride. And there's all kinds of metaphor. And there's one verse in Shir HaShirim that says, like an apple among the trees of the wood, so is my beloved. We see Israel compared to an apple. Now later on, there is another comparison where the bride, which as we know represents Israel, is compared to a pomegranate. It says your lips are like a thread of scarlet, your mouth is comely, your temple, that is the forehead, is like a piece of pomegranate within your locks, locks meaning the hair. Now, what is this comparison? The word for temple, not a big building, but the upper part of the face, is rakah. And this is compared to a pomegranate. And rakah is etymologically related to the word reik, which means empty. So the Talmud understands it as saying that even the empty ones from Israel, those who are empty of good deeds, relatively empty, nonetheless, even they are like a pomegranate, meaning even they are full of good deeds, as a pomegranate is full of seeds. And by the way, this symbolism of the seeds of the pomegranate representing good deeds is connected to the custom on Rosh Hashanah that we eat a pomegranate as one of the symbolic foods. So what is the difference between an apple and a pomegranate? Well, let's look at the pomegranate. How is it indeed that someone can be empty, we say the empty ones amongst Israel, and yet we say they are full of good deeds? And the answer to this question, and it's a very powerful metaphor, can be found if we look at the pomegranate itself. The Pomegranate has many, many seeds. It's almost all seeds. And yet they are compartmentalized. Each one is wrapped, has its own little sac in which it is wrapped up in, an individual membrane. What does that mean? That the deeds and the good things that the person does, they may be many, many of them, but each one is separate. They are not joined into an integral whole. They have not affected his character as a whole. So someone is doing a lot of great things. It's very important he's or she has confronted this idea that they need to do good. And they do many things, but they're at a stage where it hasn't transformed their entity into one which fully identifies with the good, even as it acknowledges the need to do good. That's a pomegranate. Now, if you contrast with an apple, which is just one whole fruit, this represents the individual who is totally identified and is integrated and internalized the good to the extent that he is or she is transformed. And in general terms, in the Jewish philosophical terminology, the apple is the tzaddik, generally speaking, the righteous one, and the pomegranate is not one who is empty per se, because look at all the good deeds. Someone who is embarking on the path of good, but hasn't reached the goal yet, so it's an incredibly important crossroads. The Baal Teshuvah, more or less the penitent. And generally in these discussions, as we know, the Talmud says the penitent, the Baal Teshuvah, stands on a higher level than the tzaddik. By the way, all of us can be both of these at different parts of our life. If we are treading the righteous path, we are righteous. If we go off the path, so we are not as much so. When we return, then we become like the Baal Teshuvah. And so this is the pomegranate and the apple. And we were told that the Kohen Gadol has at the bottom of the robe pomegranates. And here too we see the incredible how thorough the symbolism is, because it's the bottom of the robe, the hem, because the pomegranate represents those who are lower on the path towards goodness and towards holiness. And even those must be part of the garment of the Kohen Gadol, because his service is not complete if that is not there. As a matter of fact, it says in the verse, its sound shall be heard when he enters into the holy before God, and he shall not die. And from this, Rashi says, rather obviously, that there's an implication here, that if this is missing, then he is worthy of death. He's not punished with death, but actually all variations in the priestly garments are considered a very serious violation. As you can imagine, and this will be perhaps for another discussion, the more one comes closer to the essence of holiness, the more every detail makes a difference. A mechanical problem in a car is not nearly as serious as a tiny problem in a spaceship going to the moon. However, in general, what we're being told is that the necessity of the Kohen to include within himself every single level of the nation is so essential that his very existence depends upon it. And that is why that rimon, that pomegranate, must be there, even though it's at the very bottom hem, representing those who are still struggling with good. They are embracing the path of good, but not to the extent that their entity has been transformed. What does it have to do with bells? Wait for the next section.